Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football Actuary Podcast. I am your host, Brock Talby, the Fantasy Football Actuary. Welcome to this special Tuesday edition of the show. It is a holiday week. We have lots of football on Thursday. It's going to be a really fun week 12. It's playoff crunch time, so it's more important than ever to make the right moves with the waiver wire and your starting lineup if you are in the playoff bubble, which I currently am in one of my leagues, my ESPN 10 team standard league. So, with that segue, we will go into congratulate or commiserate. If you are new to the show, this is where I talk about how I did in my three leagues for this past week, and then we go to a listener to see how they did, and we can congratulate each other or commiserate together. So I went 3-0 in all of my leagues. I won this week. It was a very good week. I think I was top three scorer in all three leagues. So yeah, it was a very good week for me. Finally coming together, my 10 team standard league on ESPN. It has been a bumpy road. I've had some injuries, I've made some trades, but I think I have my team in a good spot for the playoff push. I just got to make the playoffs. So these next couple weeks are vital. I'm currently in as the sixth seed. And I think I have a good shot based on my ending schedule and everyone else's schedules and the total points scored, stuff like that. I think I have the best shot of getting into the playoffs out of all the other bubble teams. So we'll see. I need more out of Lamar Jackson probably if I want to actually make some noise in the playoffs. He has been a little bit of a letdown. I traded for him based on his playoff schedule. This week's going to be a little rough, but after he gets through Pittsburgh, it's smooth sailing. So hopefully he can turn it around. And Mark Andrews finally came alive for me. I also have Zeke. I traded for him a couple weeks ago, and it has been not that good until this past week when he went over 100 yards. So I was able to win in that league. My 12 team Superflex league, I was down Josh Allen. He was on bye this week. So I managed to pick up Taysom Hill. So for my starting quarterback, I had options this week. I had Matthew Stafford, Taysom Hill, and Alex Smith. Unfortunately, I played Matthew Stafford and Alex Smith. I left Taysom Hill on my bench, not sure how he would pan out as a quarterback. Stafford had been good for the last couple of weeks, and Alex Smith was the yard leader the last 2 weeks. He hadn't thrown that many touchdowns, but I figured against Cincinnati that he could do that. He threw one touchdown, did not throw for very many yards. He kind of turned into a game manager. So both of those quarterbacks scored under 8 points for me, but I was able to win still, and I was a top three scorer. I had AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson. Those are my wide receivers in both my 12 team Superflex and my 10 team standard. So those guys are panning out well for me. And then in the 12 team Superflex, I also have Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs and Antonio Gibson as running backs. So everything turned out well. I also picked up Cleveland in both of those leagues and started them as defense. So that was a good move. And then my dynasty style league on Reality Sports Online, I was able to win as well. I'm pretty sure I have a playoff spot basically locked up at this point. Yeah, and I play the two worst teams in the league to close out weeks 12 and 13. So should be 2 wins going in to the playoffs, and I should be sitting at a 2 seed in my division. So we will go to a listener. Max wrote in, and he shared that he took down the first place team and moved to 5-6 to remain in the playoff hunt. That is fantastic work. It looks like his opponent was missing Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. It looks like because they were on bye, and then his opponent also has Alvin Kamara, who had a very down week. So way to take advantage. Congratulations on the win. It looks like it was a tight win. He only won by 2 points. So congratulations, Max. Hopefully you can make the playoff push and continue making those smart moves and get a little bit lucky like you did this week. So that was congratulate or commiserate. We will move into the next Tuesday segment. It is high flying or nose diving. I'm going to talk about a couple quarterbacks, a couple running backs, some wide receivers, and tight ends. someone who I think is high flying or on the upswing based on this past week or maybe the last couple of weeks, and somebody who is nose diving or on the decline, someone that I am worried about going forward. So my high flying quarterback, I mentioned him earlier, it is Taysom Hill. He's undoubtedly a quarterback. I don't know how that was ever a question, and I hope not too many of your leagues were ruined by playing on ESPN and their poorly run fantasy platform. But anyway, Hill was the QB3 on the week, and he didn't even throw a touchdown. So, yeah, it panned out for him. I was hesitant. I left him on my bench. Like I said, I played Stafford and Alex Smith over him, which did not pan out. QB3 on the week, didn't throw a touchdown. He was very much a game manager. He was very efficient. They kind of dominated the Falcons. He was 18 for 23 for 233 yards, which is a great yards per completion number, and he ran for 51 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. So his rushing was expected. We knew this. We knew that Taysom Hill was fast. We knew that he could rush. That's why he was used as a gadget player a lot. So any quarterback that has this kind of rushing base is definitely worth starting consideration. I just didn't know how the passing work would turn out, but Michael Thomas went over 100 yards in this game. He did not dump it off to Kamara, but he still finished with a decent yardage total and 2 rushing touchdowns, and the 50 yards just propels him way higher in the quarterback standings. He gets to play Denver this next week and then Atlanta again in 2 weeks before Drew Brees is even eligible to come back. So you have 2 good weeks of Taysom Hill on tap, and I would play him. I'm probably going to play him over Stafford this week. I get Josh Allen back in my Superflex league, but I think I'm going to go with Taysom Hill over Matthew Stafford. Just that rushing base was just so valuable. I don't expect 2 rushing touchdowns every week, but averaging 1 rushing touchdown a week isn't out of the realm of possibilities for Taysom Hill. Also, if Drew Brees misses, his playoff schedule is pretty good with Philadelphia, Kansas City, and Minnesota. So Taysom Hill could be a league winner, especially in any Superflex or 2 QB league like I picked him up. So yeah, Taysom Hill, he is on the rise. My nose diving quarterback is Tua. If you picked him up hoping he would be something, I think he's basically now unplayable. He got benched in the 4th quarter for Ryan Fitzpatrick, who almost came back and won the game for the Dolphins. Tua was totally inept. He only threw for 80 yards. He took 6 sacks. He was not moving the offense. Yeah, and Fitzpatrick came in and he was a lot better. So even in 2 QB leagues, I think Tua is an absolute fade and he should be on your bench. My high flying running back is Ezekiel Elliott, which I am so excited about. It warms my little heart because I acquired him a few weeks ago, and it's looked like a bad trade because of his sad excuse for quarterback play. He had the 3rd string and 4th string quarterback. Basically, when Andy Dalton went out with the concussion and then the COVID, it was a crapshoot at quarterback, and Dallas was just awful. But with Dalton back, the offense looked good enough to support some fantasy value, and Zeke went over 100 rushing yards for the first time this season, and he caught a touchdown pass, which is very good. So, yes, I am bullish on Ezekiel Elliott going forward now. Hopefully, Andy Dalton can get the offense back to similar numbers. Obviously, he's no Dak. I think Dak's a really good quarterback, but I think he is a lot more competent than Ben DiNucci, and I don't even remember who the other quarterback was. So that's how good they were. My nose diving running back is Alvin Kamara. This is really an easy pick. He just was not involved in the passing game at all. He broke a 56 game streak where he had caught at least 1 catch in every game. So 56 games straight, he had at least 1 catch. This week, he had 1 target and 0 catches. Taysom Hill's just a different kind of quarterback. He doesn't need to dump off to Alvin Kamara. He just takes off and runs by himself. So those dump off passes that Drew Brees was giving to Kamara are becoming rushing yards for Taysom Hill. It's going to be rough as long as Taysom Hill's quarterback to play Alvin Kamara. He's obviously he has touchdown upside every week. He scored again this week. And he's a pretty decent rusher, but where he was making his money was in the passing game. He was basically like a wide receiver with some running back stats thrown in one position spot on your lineup, and he's no longer that. So if you could, I don't know how you could trade Alvin Kamara. You probably have to keep holding on to him, but you need to adjust expectations. He will not be what he was when he was playing with Drew Brees. My high flying wide receiver this week is Keenan Allen. Justin Herbert force feeds Allen like he's the only receiver on the field. He had 19 targets this past week, and that volume's just insane. And it's not just an exception. This week wasn't like an outlier. This has been the trend. He's been getting 16, 19, over 15 targets in multiple games now. Justin Herbert just knows how to force feed his best player, and it's making him look good. It's making Keenan Allen look good. If your trade deadline hasn't passed, I would try to acquire Keenan Allen. I think he's going to lead a lot of teams to championships, and the volume is just so secure, and Justin Herbert is good. So when you have a good quarterback giving you 19 targets in a game, you're going to be a stud wide receiver, and people might be sleeping on Keenan Allen still just because he's had so many injuries in the past. I know he wasn't really on my radar going into the year, but it has panned out. So if you could acquire Keenan Allen before the playoffs, I would do so. My nose diving wide receiver is Robbie Anderson. The lack of volume here is not the problem for Robbie Anderson. There's just too many mouths to feed in Carolina, especially with the emergence of Curtis Samuel and the presumed number one wide receiver, DJ Moore. They're both there. Anderson had 9 targets this week and 7 catches, which is really good, but he only had 46 yards. For some reason, he's not being used as a field stretcher. He's not getting long passes. He's getting short passes, and that must be their game plan. 9 targets is really good, and it's hard to sit a guy that is getting that kind of volume at wide receiver, but I don't think you can have any confidence in Robbie Anderson going forward. So he's a hard fade for me. He's definitely not where he was at the beginning of the season, where he looked like the clear number one in Carolina and he was getting long touchdowns, long passes. He's a possession guy now, and that is not going to help your fantasy lineup. My high flying tight end is Mark Andrews. As a Mark Andrews owner, it's about freaking time. Outside of the Thanksgiving brawl with Pittsburgh coming up, the schedule for the Ravens and Andrews is so perfect that I think Andrews is going to be a staple on a lot of championship lineups. This is why I acquired Lamar Jackson too. I wanted the Lamar to Mark Andrews stack, and with that juicy schedule after this Pittsburgh game, I think it's going to serve me well. I just need to slip into the playoffs in that 10-team standard league where I got Lamar and Mark Andrews, and I think it'll be smooth sailing. Yeah, obviously you were still starting Mark Andrews because he had upside every week, and he is a really good tight end. It had just been a disappointment for many, many weeks in a row. So this was fantastic to see. 96 yards and a touchdown. Hopefully he can keep it up. My nose diving tight end is Austin Hooper. So I think the appendicitis just really killed his momentum. He was trending up. He was gaining more targets each week. He was becoming more involved and trusted by Baker. Then he got sick. He missed some time, and he's been irrelevant since his return. So the tight end landscape is rough, but I think you can do better than Austin Hooper. A few weeks ago, he was my favorite tight end pickup, and he just hasn't panned out after the appendicitis. It's not too late to turn it around, but I don't think you can start Austin Hooper right now. So that will conclude my high flying and nose diving segment, and we will jump right into straight fire from the waiver wire. So this is generally the most important Tuesday episode segment. The waiver wire is not that good this week, in my opinion. But I will say it's almost the playoffs, so don't be afraid to spend up. If you need a starting running back or you need a starting wide receiver this week and there's a guy you like, spend up on him. Make sure you get him in your lineup because you need him this week. You need a win. You need to make the playoffs. It's not time to, oh, well, I could get this guy this week. Maybe this guy will pan out. If you need a win, if you need a start, if you need a play this week, spend up. For that reason, I usually tell you about what percentage of fab I would spend on each player. I'm not going to do that this week because it's the playoffs and you need to determine for yourself how much you need to spend and how much you need a player. So it's hard to give a gauge of how much fab to spend because it's team dependent. If you need a guy, spend up. So my favorite target at running back this week is two guys. It is the Ravens running back of your choice. So if you need to play this week, pick up Gus Edwards. J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram both tested positive for COVID yesterday, and they are already ruled out of Thursday night's game. Gus has the backfield to himself, and he should be a solid start even in a tough matchup. A couple weeks ago, Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins did well against the Steelers. That defense did not slow them down. Gus Edwards is by himself now. He should get more touches. He should get more looks. And I think he'll probably end up with a rushing touchdown. So Gus Edwards, if you need to play this week, Gus Edwards is your guy. J.K. Dobbins, however, looked to take a leap this past week. He had over 60% snap share and over 15 touches. And he turned that into a very solid fantasy day of 85 total yards and a touchdown. So it looks like J.K. Dobbins is starting to solidify himself in more of a starter role, and Mark Ingram's kind of taking a back seat. And in this past game, Gus Edwards took a back seat to J.K. Dobbins. So if you need to play this week, I think Gus is your guy. If you want a solid running back with momentum and a juicy playoff schedule, which I cannot highlight enough, the Ravens have a great playoff schedule, then you pick up J.K. Dobbins. This week, Gus Edwards. Going forward, J.K. Dobbins. So you just got to pick what your team needs for this week or for your playoff run. Other running backs to consider, Wayne Gallman's probably the next best option. He's been very fantasy relevant since Devonta Freeman got hurt. So any starting running back, he's not that widely owned, surprisingly enough, probably because he's Wayne Gallman. But he's a starting running back, and he's been good since Devonta Freeman got hurt. He's my next best option. James White, I think, is also a good pickup. Rex Burkhead went out with a knee injury. I'm pretty sure it's a torn ACL. I haven't seen confirmed reports of that, but he's likely done for the season. James White came in. He immediately had 9 catches for 60-something yards, and that's going to be what James White does. He is going to be more involved in the passing game. He probably won't get any more rushing work because Sony Michel got activated from the IR. So the Patriots have Damian Harris and Sony Michel for rushing and early down work, but James White has that pass catching back role all to himself now with Rex Burkhead out. So he's a decent pickup, especially in any kind of PPR league. He just slides right into your flex. Cam Akers, he looked like the lead back last night for the Rams and 2 weeks ago as well, but it's hard to predict if that will change from game to game. It's really a 3-way split, and I don't want any part of it, but if you're super desperate and these other guys are taken, Cam Akers, he did score his first touchdown last night, so he's a decent grab. My top wide receiver to grab is Michael Pittman. He had his second consecutive week of fantasy production with 66 yards and a touchdown. Unfortunately, he didn't see a target in the second half, which was very bizarre to see in such a close game. They went into overtime. Michael Pittman just didn't get targeted after halftime. But even so, he looks like the best receiving option for Rivers and the Colts offense, and his schedule is insane. Okay, this is his upcoming schedule. He's got Tennessee, Houston, Las Vegas, Houston again, and then championship week is Pittsburgh. So maybe don't play him in week 16, but from week 12 to 15, it's just open season. I think those are all fantastic matchups. You get Houston twice. Tennessee's defense has not been that good. They've given up a lot of points to wide receivers. And we saw a Las Vegas defense Sunday night, just give up the game to Patrick Mahomes in a minute's time. And so I don't have any confidence in Las Vegas defense either. The team's decent, but their defense is not. So all of those are great matchups for Michael Pittman, and he is my top wide receiver to grab this week. Other wide receivers to consider, Nelson Aguilar. He's only about 10% owned in ESPN, but he keeps getting it done. He's sitting at wide receiver 30 on the season in my scoring format, and he went for 88 yards and another touchdown this past week. So Nelson Aguilar, he's the best receiving option on the Raiders. And Derek Carr is playing really well too. I saw a stat earlier today that Derek Carr is the third highest rated quarterback since week 5 or something. It's like that. Yeah, that's just crazy. So Derek Carr is playing well, and Nelson Aguilar is his top receiving option. Russell Gage is another interesting pickup. He had Julio Jones went out with a hamstring injury again, and Russell Gage got 12 targets, but Matt Ryan is historically not good when Julio is out. So you can pick up Russell Gage and he might get you 12 targets, but I don't know how good he's going to be in your fantasy lineup because Matt Ryan struggles without Julio. It was Damiere Byrd's turn in New England this past week. He finished with 132 yards and a touchdown. So take your shot on him or Jakobi Meyers if you're desperate. I doubt they both have fantasy relevant games in the same week, so you're probably going to get one or the other. It looked like Jakobi Meyers was becoming a trustworthy fantasy asset the last couple weeks, and then he had like a 10% target share this week, dropping down from like the 30s, and it was Byrd's turn to dominate. So take your shot there if you're desperate on those New England guys. My top tight end to grab is Dallas Goedert again. He's about, it says 59% owned in ESPN. So he might be owned in your league, but with how tight end goes, outside of him, it's slim pickings. So he is my top tight end to grab because he's available in about 40% of leagues. He had a productive week fueled by a garbage time touchdown. But Wentz looks so bad, it's hard to trust any pass catcher in Philly right now. Carson Wentz is just not on his game. He does not look like a starting quarterback in the NFL. But like I said, the tight end landscape's so bleak. Outside of the top few guys, Goddard should definitely be owned. And he's just as good of a play as anybody else, not named Kelsey, Waller, or Andrews at tight end. So take your shot, Dallas Goedert. He can score a touchdown every week. He's involved enough. It's just a poor passing attack right now, led by Wentz. And he's not that exciting. It's probably why he's only owned in 60% of leagues. Other tight ends to consider, I have one here. It's Jordan Akins. He looked like he was back as the top tight end for Deshaun Watson this past week. He had 6 targets, 5 catches, and 83 yards. He was the top tight end target to start the season, and then he got hurt. Darren Fells kind of came in. Akins he came back from injury a couple weeks ago. He hasn't been that involved until this past week, but 6 targets, 83 yards, that's solid. He's playing for Deshaun Watson, who's just tearing it up. He tore up New England's defense. Deshaun Watson's on fire right now, so you could do worse than grabbing the top tight end target for one of the best quarterbacks in the league. And Randall Cobb's now injured, so this could lead to more short passing work to the tight end spot, which presumably would be Akins. And that will conclude the straight fire from the waiver wire. Hopefully, like I said, it's not that good this week, but hopefully there's 1 or 2 guys that you can plug and play if you have holes in your lineups for this pivotal week 12 and then week 13 matchup before the playoffs. We will conclude this episode with my favorite quarterback streamers of the week. And once again, it's tough streaming out there this week. Last week, Kirk Cousins was my favorite stream, and he came through in a big way. But this week, there's not a clear pick for me. Based on matchup, Carson Wentz has the best matchup, but I would not start Carson Wentz. So my next option, looking at how good you've been and your matchup, Phillip Rivers is probably my top streaming option this week. He gets to play the Tennessee defense, which, like I said, hasn't been that good this season. And Rivers has had several very relevant fantasy games this year. He's been a good streaming option. Combine that with the Tennessee matchup, he's my favorite streamer of the week. If I had to pick a second option, I would pick Kirk Cousins against Carolina. He's coming off back-to-back good games, and I just trust his wide receiving duo of Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. Those 2 guys are studs. So when you're throwing to those guys, it's going to make you look better. And he also has the upside of easy dump-offs to Dalvin Cook, which give good yardage on short passes, and it could even turn into a touchdown. So when you have those kind of offensive weapons around you, you're always in play for a streaming option. And that will conclude the Tuesday episode. Usually my weekly rankings go live on Thursday. Because of the 12:30 kickoff and the holiday, I'm going to get my week 12 rankings up on Wednesday night. So you can check those out on the website, thefantasyfootballactuary.com, before the Thursday matchups kick off. If you want to watch video versions of this podcast, you can check the YouTube channel. It is The Fantasy Football Actuary. And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, it is at the FF Actuary. So that will conclude this Tuesday episode. Have fun on Thursday watching all 3 games. Enjoy the holiday with your families. Take the day off. Hopefully you have an enjoyable weekend planned. I will be back here on Saturday with the typical Saturday episode. Even though it's the holiday weekend, I will be here on Saturday to help you get those lineups set and hopefully make that playoff push. So until next time, keep crunching those numbers.